Hey Meg, it's Sean.
Hey, Sean.
Did I wake you up?
Yeah, it's okay.
I'm sorry about that. Are you still sick?
Um, I just had a friend die over the weekend, and it's been a rough weekend.
I had about the same weekend then.
Yeah. What's up?
I was gonna see about making some calls and trying to get some stuff done.
Okay. Um, do you have time tomorrow?
I do.
Okay. I took today off, and so tomorrow morning probably is going to be a little crazy, but tomorrow afternoon I could carve out some time to make some calls with you.
All right. Do you remember what all the attorney lady in Scotts Bluff had said about going to court or taking them to court? Or
She just gave me a name of a lawyer, and I called them, and they said they would talk through it and see if they were willing to take on the case. They were a little hesitant because they took on a case in that area, not not terribly unlike yours, and lost. Um, so they weren't sure they would take it, but then they said they would talk about it and then call back and then talk to you. I haven't heard back from them, so we can call them again. And then they also gave me another attorney firm that dealt more with disability out in your area, and I have not called them, so we could call them. But those are the two that she mentioned.
yeah, it's not very often that a public pretender tells you that you should sue the government. So
Yeah, what she said was, she just said, I don't understand this situation, but it doesn't look quite right to me. That's how she put it. And you might want to, she said, it's not my area, so I might be wrong, but you might want to look into it. And that's kind of how she left it. So, yeah, it's definitely worth pursuing and checking with people.
yes, ma'am. I've had people telling me that since the very start. Like even since before Natalie was killed, people were telling me, "Hey, dude, you need to take her to court. You need to take the cops to court. You need to." But the problem is with being called mentally ill, you see how easy it is for like all that work right before I got locked up. We did all that work to get everything lined up so that we could take those four people to court, and those four people worked together to prevent me from being able to go to any of my court dates.
And then tomorrow, could we also try to call that person um, that I asked you about last week? Sorry, I can't remember the name of the place. Not Region 1, but the other place.
Cirrus House.
Yeah, that.
Yes, ma'am. There's a
Okay.
lady who works there named Maggie. She's been working there long enough that she knows Jen Beebe, but she also knows Tamara, and she's also familiar with Tourette syndrome. There's a lot of people like that in the system that I spoke with that had a better understanding of what was going on,
Mm-hmm.
but none of those people were allowed to speak. It's like they were only allowing a certain type of opinion in court. And even though, like, for example, I saw 8 different doctors, and 7 of those doctors did not agree with the one doctor that they allowed to assess me.
Mm-hmm.
Like, when you've got 7 doctors who are like, all right, dude, first of all, you shouldn't be here. Second of all, like, almost everybody in the prison told me, hey, if you had a lawyer, you wouldn't be here. I said, I have a public pretender, and almost everybody there told me that they felt bad because of that. Like, even people in the system know that public pretenders aren't for shit. So that lady in Scotts Bluff, what she had to say and what she did is actually out of the ordinary. Most of them don't even try to do their job. But also, like, what it comes down to, because I'm called mentally ill, it comes down to witnesses being willing to speak up. And that right there is where my biggest issue has been this entire time. People
Mhm.
want to talk about helping, but they don't want to do what it actually takes to help.
Mhm.
You know, for them, it doesn't occur to these people that I am continuing to take this abuse every day, or that no matter where I go, I am still subject to the same crap.
Yeah.
Here in Chapel, I have a much larger chance of being victimized, but I also have a larger chance here because people know me of being able to defend myself against it. But that didn't stop me from spending 7 months in prison.
Mhm.
Like when we were setting all that up to talk to Sergeant Jones about DaCosta and about Leslie Snell and about them not doing their jobs and not investigating any of the crimes against me. Like,
Mhm.
did I or did I not call it that they were going to come and arrest me?
Yeah.
It's not like I'm not aware of how they work. It's not like I'm not aware of how their system works. You know, the other thing is, like, a lot of people tell me, well, why don't you just post everything on the internet? And, like, for example, that recording there right before I was arrested, not the one that I was arrested for, because that's actually on my YouTube. It was recorded live. That's part of the reason that they treated me well, is because they knew it was being recorded live. But the other thing is, like the other recordings, I can't put them up. Like the phone numbers and stuff like that we talk about in those conversations. I don't know how to edit the phone numbers out, so I can't post that on YouTube.
Mhm.
And as far as getting an attorney to help, most of the attorneys that I talked to, I did what they told me to. But then there's the fact that I can't even go to those places because my public pretenders didn't do their jobs. And then in order for me to go back, I have to go back into lockup in places where I've been abused. My friend Amanda, she's got a son who's autistic, and she lives in Mobile, Alabama. She was sending me some stuff this morning about places I might be able to rent down there. Um, but it's expensive, like either today or tomorrow I got to start making those calls to try to get my disability money back. But like they told you, I have to go down there to get that, right?
Well, Scottsbluff Detention Center said that you had to go there and pay $5 to get your release paperwork.
Yep,
So did they shut off your Social Security?
they did. They shut off everything. My disability money is not coming in. My medical insurance is gone. I don't have a PO box anymore. I can't receive. They screwed me as much as they possibly could. Like literally, when they do this, it prevents a person from being able to do what it is that they're legally allowed to do.
Yeah.
I mean, I should have been allowed to turn in Leslie Snell instead of spending 7 months locked up because she lied. And then they had to drop the charges because she lied, but they're not going to press charges against her. She works for the sheriff who lied. They're not doing anything about Robert Warnick. He should have been locked up for assaulting me. He should have been in trouble the first 2 times that he threatened to kill me. He should have gotten in trouble for it. Now, I got locked up for 7 months, and they don't have any evidence to lock me up based on, but they still locked me up for 7 months. Leslie Snell still got the outcome that she wanted from court because I was illegally prevented from going or from even contacting the courts. The first time that I talked to you, I'd been locked up for months already, and I was explaining to him, hey, my public pretender is not doing shit. I need to be able to talk to Meg, and I need to be able to coordinate with her, and they did everything they could to prevent me from speaking with you.
Mhm. Yeah.
It's a messed up situation, and then I got people in town that are, trying to be hospitable and help me out how they can, but they're cowards. We've got two groups in Chapel, Nebraska. We've got the assholes who run everything, and then we've got the rest of the town who's afraid to stand up. And as much as they like to call themselves good person, it's kind of like Like if someone was killing kittens, if you can just stand by and watch it, it's your fault the kittens are dead.
Yeah.
Those kittens would be alive if you actually took some effort and some time to actually do something about it. If someone's trying to kill an animal and you get between them and that animal, that's doing something. When you watch them drown kittens, you're letting them know that there are going to be no consequences and it's okay for them to do such a thing. And how many kittens are they able to kill in a lifetime? How many of those kittens would still be alive if somebody stopped them? I mean, that's.
Yeah.
And like I was telling you about the evidence, you didn't want to take the evidence, but at the same time, what happened to my evidence? It all ended up in the hands of the very people I was trying to turn in. But the other thing is, like, just like Scotts Bluff is difficult for me to drive all the way there and get things done and come back, it's even more difficult for me to go all the way to Lincoln to see you. And the other thing is, even when I was in Lincoln, they wouldn't let me see you or talk to you.
Yeah. You mentioned last week that you were gonna go work on a farm or talk to somebody on a farm, and it might end up in something that you could rent. Did that pan out?
No, ma'am. He's trying to sell the place. He said I might be able to stay out there for like 30 days or so because, once he sells the place, he's got 30 days to move out. But he's trying to sell the place, so it wouldn't be anything that would be even close to long term. Then there's also the fact that I got to be able to get my income, back.
Right.
And you went through me with that already. I
Yeah.
mean, I'd already been through a year of trying to get that money back before you started helping, and then when you started helping, it still took 6 months to get it.
Yeah. Now we know the way to get it is to produce that. Is there any way you can get that paperwork tomorrow?
Like drive up there and get it?
Yeah.
No. I got a. There's a guy here who will drive me up there to do that. He said that he'll be able to, but he needs to know when, and he's going to be going for at least a few days. He's going to be going on what's called a junk jaunt. Basically,
Okay.
it's like a bunch of garage sales. So
Hmm.
he's going to be going for a few days. When he gets back, I might be able to.
So you don't have access to that vehicle anymore?
Well, it's his vehicle.
Oh.
I do have it. Matter of fact, it's sitting right outside of where I'm at now. It's not like it's.
Hmm.
I do have access to the vehicle. It's just we don't know because it's got over 600,000 miles. We don't know if it'll even make it to Scotts Bluff.
Hmm.
And there's also the fact that, just like with everything else I've been explaining, I need somebody there in person, which is part of what he's going there for, is so that I have someone there in person.
Okay. From what I understand from the last time we did this, they will reinstate your disability money within 30 days of having that piece of paper. So if we can get that to them, you should have your income back in 30 days, or maybe possibly less. So were you able to see? You had mentioned that you had some money that they had paid already, that they didn't stop it.
Um,
Did Were you able to use that to? You were talking about purchasing a vehicle for that. With that, but did that
yes,
not
ma'am.
work out?
That's the vehicle that's outside. We don't know how long it's going to last, but he's given me a good deal on it. He also said to drive it for 2 months before deciding if I'm going to buy it. So, I mean, that's something.
Yeah.
It's definitely more help than nothing at all. And it does give me a vehicle that I can use. But then there's also, ma'am, it's cost me between $12,000 and $15,000 a year to jump through all this. All of my disability money and then some goes to the government for taking advantage of me. I mean, they completely took advantage of the situation and the desperation that I'm in, and then they victimized me for having to do desperate things because I'm being abused. They should have done something about Robert Warnick the first two times that he threatened to kill me. And then with them, assaulting me the month before the situation with Robert Warnick assaulting me, like, this is what's been going on since day one. I can't trust the Dual County Sheriff's Department unless someone is there with me. And even then, they're not going to investigate it. They're just going to go through the motions of pretending. And for me, having to go to the state patrol who's not doing nothing, and them telling me that I got to go to Dual County to turn them in, and then with Leslie Snell and her fake ass protection order, pretending like I was threatening her kids and her husband and a bunch of other creepy shit like that. Like, literally, what these people did by lying on those court documents, these are felonies. You know, this isn't like little piddly misdemeanors. These people took advantage of their positions of power in order to illegally prevent me from going to court, illegally prevent me from showing evidence, and I have to go to my predators to ask for help. Meanwhile, because of the protection order with Natalie, or with, not Natalie, with Leslie, like, I can't even call the Dual County Sheriff's Department. I can't go to the Dual County Courthouse because I was illegally prevented from going to that court date. Meanwhile, I need people that are gonna speak up and are gonna take the time to write letters, as many as they need to do something about this, because mine go absolutely nowhere. I get called mentally ill, and that's the end of the story. It's just not an end to the abuse. You get what I'm saying?
Yeah, I hear you. I have to. We have to figure out how to get your income back. And what you've always said is, if you don't have housing and you're homeless, you're not safe. And so, I don't know. What I found out from Oshkosh is that you have to have 2 years of clean renting history before public housing will take you back. And I explained that in depth, that how does a person do that if they're homeless? How do they attain clean rental history for 2 years in order to get back into housing? They didn't really have a good answer, other than a program that they say exists that you could take classes online. I said, well, what if you don't have the ability to take classes online, or you don't have the ability to get there and take them in person? And there really isn't an answer for that.
But what's this program supposed to do? Like, I would attend classes, and then magically I've got a rental history for 2 years, and they'll let me back in?
Well, no, what she told me was that these courses, or class, or whatever it is, that it counts as rental history. If you're willing to take the class, then it counts as time, basically time with good history. Now, when I tried to call and ask about the program, which apparently exists in Oshkosh, I wasn't able to talk to anybody. I got an answering machine that had a bunch of options that didn't talk about that program in particular. So I've got to call back and ask again. I think it's called Rent Smart or something like that, and say, if a person takes that, number one, how long does the class take, and number two, how much time does that actually count for?
Yeah,
And
if I have to take a class that's going to cost me money that I'm going to have to spend a bunch of time on, and then at the end of it, they're only giving me credit for 6 months, I still got to come up with a year and a
right,
half worth of rental history. There's also the fact that I can't rent a place. All of this has destroyed my credit. It's destroyed every aspect of my life. My credit score is 98.
um,
You can't even get a bank account with a credit score of 98. Part of the thing with me using this vehicle is that I don't know if I can even get insurance, because almost every time that I've gotten insurance, something screwed up has happened so that I couldn't even pay off all the insurance. On one occasion, the mail didn't send it through. On another occasion, the friend of mine who was paying the insurance, I had to send it to her and trust that she was paying it. On other occasions, I've been locked up, so I wasn't able to keep on paying it off. And then there's been the occasions where I needed to call it in after I sold a vehicle and I wasn't able to because, well, lo and behold, I didn't have a telephone because it was stolen. So, I mean, there's all of these things that I'm having to deal with. And having somebody there in person could have stopped all of this from the very start. It sucks that I was already, 3 years into hell before you even got started on it. I mean, that's frustrating for me, but it's also got to be overwhelming for you trying to play catch up.
Yeah. Well, and I'm limited in what I can do, and the things that I have done, writing letters or trying to talk to the judge, or that it hasn't made any impact at all.
Well,
And
they've done
so,
everything they can to prevent you from being able to do that. I mean, with you being muted on all of those court dates, like they write your name down that you were present, but you weren't allowed to speak.
uh,
So I don't understand how they can do that, how they can deny witnesses or any of that, and I don't get why my public pretenders wouldn't do anything about that. The first thing that Harboy should have done is get a hold of you and find out what was going on. Instead, when he talked to me, it seemed more like he was trying to keep you out of it, like you didn't matter. And I'm like, hey, she has been a part of this. She has been a witness to this. You're not doing your job, and he still didn't do his job. There's a bunch of letters and evidence and stuff that I sent to God, what's that attorney's name in Scottsbluff?
uh, Anna, I've got it written down. Sorry, I don't remember her name.
I don't remember it at the moment either, but I sent her a bunch of stuff, and I got to be able to have it sent to me, and that's going to be rather difficult because I don't have an address for her to send it to.
Will the post office let you send things the way they did?
General mail, yes,
Yeah,
but the other thing is, I have to. A lot of attorneys won't send anything general mail.
right.
They have to have an address. There's also, for a lot of this other stuff that I need to do, I need to have an address to send them, or they're not going to reinstate anything.
Will Dallas let you use his address for mail, or no?
He might.
Okay.
I'd have to ask him. But there's also like the situation with, the sheriff intimidated him, right?
Right.
So I mean, what incentive does he have to help me out when he has to be afraid of the sheriff now? And I do have that recorded. I have it recorded, him telling me about those situations and about the sheriff intimidating him and trying to use his kids to scare him and a bunch of other stuff. Now the situation's different, because Dallas is a pretty badass dad. But the other thing is, like, we've got a sheriff who's intimidating witnesses. What am I supposed to do? How am I supposed to feel safe or be safe in this town? Robert Warnick was not the first person to assault me. He wasn't the first person to threaten me. Every time that I have gone to the sheriff's department about the people threatening and harassing me, they've done absolutely nothing. Now, when these guys actually commit these crimes against me, there's no consequences for them, which allows them to be more brazen and do it more. Kind of like the situation with Waylon Lolatai in Colorado. After he assaulted me and there were no consequences, he assaulted 6 more homeless people that year. It's setting a very bad example.
So, this person that you know in Mobile, Alabama, what are they saying about there's places for you to rent there, but they're too expensive?
Well, she sent me a picture of, she said they were tiny homes, but it's not tiny homes, it's a mobile home. And the place wants like $300 a month for lot rent. Plus, you have to spend $4,000 for the trailer. And the trailer's at about a 15-degree. It's a messed up trailer. The door frames are not straight. It's got water damage all over the place. It's got visible mold in the pictures. I mean, it looks dangerous, to be honest.
Mhm.
But
Well,
I'm dealing with a bunch of catch-22 situations. Like, I
well, you
can't
don't want.
do anything about the courts because of a protection order, and I need to be able to contact the courts in order to do something about that protection order. There's also the fact that there should have been a protection order to protect me from Leslie Snell. There should have been a protection order to protect me from Sheriff DaCosta. There should have been a protection order, especially to protect me against people like Robert Warnick. You know, he got to threaten to kill me on more than one occasion and get away with it. And then there's people that I can actually prove that they threatened me exactly when they threatened me because I have screenshots and I have, you know, the recordings and everything, but I still need somebody to go in with me so they'll look at it. There's been a couple of occasions I've gone in to show evidence and they've turned off the video that I'm showing them. It's a conversation with a witness and they turn it off in the middle of it. Like, you know, they really do need to hear what's going on. They do need to look at the evidence. They need to actually do their jobs. Otherwise, what are we paying them for?
Well, and the thing is you're back to square one in terms of shelter and income, and so that's the part that I can help with is the shelter and income, and I don't even know. At least the income we've got to get started, and I don't. I hope you're protecting what you had when you got out, because what if there is something that's not scary like the I never thought about a tiny home. I never thought about a lot. Um, but the other thing is to try to do some research into what states have better records than Nebraska for adult services. You know, I can try to help with that.
Well, I keep getting told about all of the resources that are over on the east end of the state, but everything west of North Platte, we get nothing out of here. And even the services that you guys get there aren't that great.
In adult services, there's not a lot of options. And there are some, but there's not a lot. But the biggest thing is this whole catch 22 of your eviction counting against you and not being able to recover from that to get back into public
And not
housing.
being able to defend myself against it too. I mean, one of the things that I don't know if I sent it to you at the very beginning or not, but one of them is the people who run the housing authority here. They were actually in the news in Omaha for what they were doing to their tenants. There's a lady up at low income here named Kimberly who, you know, she was able to move out of there because she had family help, but she had a lot to say about the way that they treated her. And then there's uh, Bob, who is my neighbor, and he had the same issues. And then there's Susie, who had the same issues, and she's actually in prison for murder. But you know, there's at least half a dozen people just in Chapel uh, from the low income up there on the hill that had that stuff going on. And with it being on the news, like obviously, you know, there's some truth to what I'm saying. But instead, I get treated, even though all of these predators of mine have ended up on the news after I told on them, people still pretend like I'm crying wolf. Like, you know, this person would do all these horrible things to all these other people, but they would never in a million years do things like that to me. And it's like, you know, that's not how it is. I'm easier to victimize than most of the people that they're victimizing, and people victimize whoever it's the easiest to get away with victimizing.
Well, um,
That's one of the things about growing up where I did is that I have an education and all of this stuff that people want to give advice on that don't have any education. I have firsthand information, firsthand education, firsthand knowledge, and firsthand experience in most of this stuff. So when I'm talking, I'm not talking out my backside. Sorry for rambling.
that's okay. We need to figure out how to get you to Scottsbluff ASAP to get the paperwork, because we've got to get your income back. Without your income, then you don't even have the ability to even pay $100 rent somewhere if something would come across your path.
There's
I know that's
also
not
all
going
of
to
the court
happen, but
stuff. The all of the court stuff needs to be dealt with before I can take care of anything else, because it's all of that court stuff that I wasn't allowed to defend myself in, and nobody else was making any effort to defend me in. Like, those have long-term effects on everything. A lot of people want to give advice without knowing what the hell is going on. They tell me I just need to let it go and I just need to move on and so on and so forth. And it doesn't occur to most of these people that I've moved over 40 times in the last 5 years. It doesn't occur to them that the court dates that I've had to go through and have been prevented from going through prevent me from doing a lot legally. Me not being allowed to go to court over the situation at low income allows them to prevent me from having a place to live for 2 years. Meanwhile, I should have been allowed to turn in the situation that was going on there to the sheriff's department here in Chapel. Being forced to go to the sheriff's department that doesn't do anything, and then, them victimizing me again and again and again. And I keep saying, hey, I need to be able to turn this into somebody else. And I get told all of these other places I got to turn it into. I still need to be able to talk to Sergeant Jones. I need to have somebody there on the conversation and the call with me, so they don't pull any of the stuff that they've been pulling. And the thing that you said about Sergeant Jones, how you think she's a good woman who wants to do the right thing. I hope that's true. But then there's the situation with Stephanie Mejia where she had just the opposite to say. And sometimes cops are different depending on who they're talking to.
well, I can't say anything about Stephanie. I don't know her. I didn't have firsthand encounters with her, but it appears that she tended to just say whatever people wanted to hear. I don't know. I really don't know, so I can't speak on that. But all I can say is the parts that haven't changed is that you're not safe if you're homeless, and that you can't go through all these documents, and you can't get organized, and you can't do any of these things if you're homeless because you're unsafe. And so that still is directly connected to you being able to go through all of this stuff to get the court stuff all lined up. You can't do it outside. You can't do it in the elements. You can't do it without internet.
And that's why Scott DaCosta was doing what he did. Like, when he assaulted me back in December of last year, the first thing he did was intimidate the people that I was staying with and say that they couldn't have power out there where I had power, and I couldn't have access to the internet, and so on and so forth. Like, he did everything he could to try to prevent me from showing evidence. I mean, that's the thing about the police, is that they've been through this enough. They know how to play the system, how to warp the system, how to manipulate the laws, and how to prevent an innocent person from being able to speak up or to sue them. And the thing is that when a disabled person is abused like this, there should be jail time passed out. That means that there should be some investigations by actual law enforcement. But instead, it's like a running joke with them. They tell me, oh, well, just get a lawyer. You can get a lawyer when you get out. A lawyer, a lawyer, a lawyer. Like, hold on a second. If, let's say I get raped. If I get raped, that is a criminal act. I should be able to turn in my rapist and know that there is going to be a protection order immediately in place to prevent my rapist from having access to me. That's what should happen. I shouldn't be told, all right, well, you need to get a lawyer when you get out and sue them in a civil court. Well, hold on a second. Is rape not a felony? And that's the problem with law enforcement. They bypass the law enforcement, and you have to have the money for a real attorney who's actually going to do something. And especially here in western Nebraska, they simply don't care. If you are called mentally ill, you don't get to speak in court. A lot of the court dates that you were allowed to at least listen in on, you weren't allowed to speak. And the ones that you didn't listen in on, I was prevented from speaking in. I had to depend on Robert Harvoy to do his job, and he wasn't. And I tried to do something about that, just like I did when I was in Colorado, and they wouldn't. Homeless people don't matter. Homeless people just have to take it, and that's simply the way that it is. But I don't get to let it go because the courts don't let it go. These people don't let it go because they were all lied to. A lot of those web sleuth groups, every time they make another story about Natalie, it's 30 minutes long, and they spent the first 25 minutes trying to build up suspense and try to make it look like eventually I'm the one who killed Natalie. But then, at the end of their segment, they pull out the Joseph Michael Lopez stuff and admit that Joseph Michael Lopez killed him. But then again, how many people are going to listen to that whole 30-minute thing? They listen to half of it, and then next thing I know, I've got people getting a hold of me on Facebook saying they're going to castrate me, or they're going to cut off my head, or they're going to shoot me, and they send me pictures of their guns and their knives and all sorts of other creepy shit. And I've got all of that documentation. The problem is there is still nobody who's going to look at it because I don't have a representative in person to speak for me. For me, trying to work with public pretenders who aren't even pretending to defend me, like when I was in Arapahoe County, they were able to pressure me into pleading guilty to some bullshit by locking me up and by my attorneys literally doing nothing. It was my attorneys who were threatening, harassing, and intimidating me in that situation. It was my public pretenders, I should say, not attorneys, because they're not actual attorneys. They kept on telling me the limits of what they're allowed to do. I'm like, well, how can you call yourself a real attorney if you're telling me that you can't do the things that a real attorney can do? You can't bring up any evidence that a real attorney could bring up. You can only bring up what the judge tells you you're allowed to. Well, how screwed up is that? If the judge says, well, he only has a public pretender, so you're only allowed to show what the police show, and then we're in a situation like mine, like, what are we to do about that? Then there's the fact that, I've been telling the truth the whole time, and the situation with you, you're a key witness to all of this. I mean, you're a witness that can verify that I've been telling the truth. Then there's also, like, when you and I first started talking, you hadn't gotten to see any of that evidence, and you had a lot of suggestions that were, well, they weren't exactly useful because you didn't have all the information. But then when I was able to send you stuff and show you that I was telling you the truth, you had a different outlook on it, and you realized that, yeah, I'm telling the truth, and this is a complicated situation. And that's how it's been since the very start of it. It's been a complicated situation since the very start. Now,
Right.
with a lot of the people that I've been able to show evidence to, they're like they're the same as you at the very beginning. They're too busy giving advice to really know what's going on. And then, once they do realize what's going on, they're like, dude, you're screwed. You're in a really screwed up situation. I don't know how to help you. But
Right.
then, unlike most of those people, you at least make the calls with me. Now, a lot of people say, I need to be patient. I need to be patient. And I really do. Like, I need to get my income back and get that started. But with you being sick for a week, I mean, that's not something that's my fault. But it's also something that I do have to be patient with. I do have to. I have to depend on somebody else, and if that somebody else happens to be sick, then they happen to be sick, and I just have to deal with it. And that's where a lot of people's advice is just completely going out the window, is that they haven't bothered to look at any of that evidence. When I was trying to send you all that before I was arrested, like, I was trying to make sure that you got everything sent as soon as possible. And when they arrested me, I knew that with all of the money that I'd paid out for the Google Drive thing and the cloud thing and the MacBook thing and all that other stuff that I paid for, I knew that I had only paid for 30 days worth of that, and that I needed to get a hold of you before 30 days was up, or that stuff was going to be lost. And, you know, it is. A lot of that stuff, they can't see it at the other end because it's expired. I have to be able to go back and pay for a year's worth of that or whatever at a time, and then maybe be able to work with it. But I mean, that's a lot of stuff that I needed your help with. We spent all night working on that, you know. For us to be able to sit down and do that again is, well, it'll take a lot of time just like it did before, but like you said, we're starting off at ground zero again. I knew that if I was incarcerated for longer than 30 days, that I would lose my medical, I would lose my disability money, that I would lose my post office box, that I would lose all of these things that I need to protect myself, that I need to be able to defend myself, that I need to be able to correspond with these lawyers and get my legal information and get my paperwork sent. You know, my predators literally took all of that away from me. They took away my ability to do any of that, and they have done this repeatedly. This is not just specific to Dual County Sheriff's Department. They did the same thing in Colorado. They did the same thing in Washington State. And that all comes down to an arrest record. You know, when I was arrested, they claimed that I had assaulted Waylon Lolatai, and that's on my arrest record. And even though they dropped the charges, every officer who looks my name up sees that I was charged with assaulting a police officer, and then they pretend like I am some sort of a horrible person and refuse to listen to a damn thing I say. The few times that they do pretend to listen is when I've got somebody like you on the phone with me, or like with Stephanie Mejia. She went in with me to talk to the Cheyenne County Sheriff's Department. You know, there's a lot of messed up things that the Sheriff's Department here in Chapel is trying to leave out. And at this point, it's looking like Cheyenne County is helping them out. Now, the people in this town, like I said, it's a small town. Most of the people that I talk to or associate with in this town don't like anybody in town because it's such a rotten place to live. You know, everybody's got nothing better to do than talk about what everybody else is doing, whether those people are doing that or not. And the people that I talk to and associate with here, they don't want anything to do with that situation. They don't want anything to do with the drama or whatever. And that's the thing. To them, it's drama. To me, it's abuse. If someone is being raped, that's still abuse. If someone is being assaulted, that is still abuse. If somebody is having their life threatened, it is still abuse. The difference between whether or not it's abuse or drama is whether or not it's happening to me or you. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Now, a lot of the stuff that you said that you were not able to do, you ended up doing anyway. The stuff that you literally had to explain to the Dual County Sheriff's Department that you don't do those things, you ended up doing those things anyway. And they were already aware that you couldn't do the things that they were saying that you were supposed to be doing. They were already aware of that. I had already explained it to them, and I'd already explained it to you, and until I was able to show you the evidence that I was actually doing that, it was, well, it's as complicated as explaining it to anybody else. If they're not able to see the evidence, it's difficult. Once they're able to see the evidence, it's an open book. It's clear as night and day. It's obvious what's going on. Well, like with that public defender lady in Scotts Bluff, you know, she was able to look at that paperwork and realize something wasn't quite right. Well, there hasn't been anything right about any of this situation. You know, when Natalie's druggy friends first started threatening to kill me and first started assaulting me before she was ever killed, the police should have done something about it then. But now I got to deal with every time that I try to turn in Scott DaCosta or one of his deputies, I end up locked up on trumped up charges again and again and again. This is the fourth time they've done this just in Dual County. Maybe the fifth time, I don't know. Like, without somebody there in person, this is what I have to deal with for the rest of my life. The amount of money that the money that I have wasted on false charges should have been used to get me a safe place. And had I not had to spend all of that money on trumped up charges over Waylon Lolatai and Leslie Snell and Sheriff DaCosta and his deputies, I would be in a safe place right now. If it weren't for them ignoring the crimes that are committed against me, I could be in a safe place right now. But the thing is, they trumped up charges on me based on absolutely no evidence because they thought that they could lock me up, prevent me from speaking to people like you, and literally destroy and hide evidence of their wrongdoing. And without somebody speaking up, I'm stuck with this. And a lot of people don't want to talk to the media, but the thing is, the media, that's how the police were able to screw me to begin with, is by abusing the powers of the media to try to make me look like some sort of a monster. But it's been 4 years of threats, harassment, and assault over and over again, especially by law enforcement. Being able to get on the phone with Sergeant Jones and you at the same time is pretty important at this point because I feel like without you on the phone with me that I'm going to get blown off. And that's just because my experience is that I'm going to get blown off unless someone goes in with me. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and I can, like we've established over the last year, I am unable to do anything in person, but I can do that. I can be on the phone with you, and I can still try to help you make those calls. Unfortunately, I can't be that person in person, and in all honesty, after looking at all this stuff for the last year, I just even if you had just a random person, that would be better than nobody first. But an attorney has to take this on. Only an attorney can really help pursue this. Lay people would not be able to help you in that way.
But the thing is that witnesses are the most important thing. I just found out that my friend Christine died. She's a key witness. My friend Mobley was killed too. So there's two key witnesses that are gone. Rory Jepson is dead too. There's another witness who's gone. Janine Barrett, she's also dead. That's another witness that's gone. Rayanna Ingersoll is another witness who's dead. I mean, the longer this goes on, the more witnesses end up dead. Then
And
there's
those are people from in Colorado, primarily.
primarily some of them in Colorado, some of them here in Nebraska, some in Wyoming.
Okay.
But these people, they think that getting a lawyer means that everything is going to be fine and dandy. No, those witnesses
No.
still need to speak up. Like,
Yeah, I'm not saying that.
and because
Obviously,
I'm
you
called
need.
mentally ill, somebody has to make the calls with me. A lawyer or
Right.
attorney is not going to pick up my case if I call alone. They're just not going
Right.
to.
And that's not what I meant. I didn't mean
I
that
know.
a lawyer in a vacuum is going to help you. Obviously, they need to be able to talk to everybody else, and they need to be able to have the evidence that you have, and they need to be able to take all the information and work with it.
And with me being a constant state of chicken with my head cut off, running around trying to find a safe place, like that's Maslow's hierarchy of needs. You can't take care of everything else unless you have a safe environment. And that's on the
Right.
very bottom rung. Food, water, and shelter.
Right.
If you don't have food, water, and shelter, obviously the internet's going by the wayside, computers and electronic evidence is going by the wayside, being able to go in and fill out paperwork is going by the wayside. You're focused on survival. You're focused on getting
Right.
something to drink, something to eat, and a roof over your head.
And that's kind of what I told you too when I told you that I was told that I needed to step back. That I have to for my own health, but I'm not willing to not help you to get those basics back. Um, and that's my biggest concern is shelter. I mean, because like you just said, you have to have those things in order to do everything else.
Yep.
There's just no way around it.
When I tried to turn in Leslie Snell, Scott DaCosta, William Barr, and Robert Warnick, The four of them worked together to make sure that I was incarcerated so that I couldn't bring charges against them. They did everything that they could to take away the shelter that I had. They did everything that they could to take away the evidence that I had. I still have to fix that phone that Robert Warnick broke so that I can show what he did. And that's even more money. And, all of this it's expensive, you know. It's expensive to be falsely charged. It's expensive to be abused. It's expensive to be called mentally ill. It's expensive to be disabled, and it's expensive to be homeless. And it's no coincidence that we got that room to try to turn in those people, and that those people had worked together to rob me of the room and the evidence and everything that I was doing, to rob me of the ability to talk to Sergeant Jones. The whole time that I was locked up, I was prevented from talking to Sergeant Jones. They did everything they could to prevent me from having letters and envelopes to send out, or to keep me to a minimal amount if I was able to send them out. When I was able to send the letters to you, that was a sheer matter of luck. It was highly abusive in there. They call me mentally ill to prevent me from making a statement or showing evidence, and then they say that I'm not mentally ill so that they can do all of the other stuff that they want to do, because they can't do both. Now, from a legal standpoint, if they're going to pretend that I'm mentally ill, they have to keep on that the whole time. If they're going to claim that I'm sane and can be tried, then they have to do that the whole time. But instead, what they've been doing is bouncing back and forth. I'm mentally ill when it suits them, and I'm sane when it suits them. I'm mentally ill when it'll prevent me from showing evidence of the crimes they committed, and then I'm sane somehow magically when it comes to the fact that, oh, well, now we're past that part, so we want you to be held accountable for defending yourself. When I first started talking to you, I wasn't sure if you were going to listen, and now you understand that I am actually going through these things, that they are actually happening, that it's not a figment of my imagination. Like, no matter what I say, I'm told that I'm mentally ill. I said, hey, they wouldn't allow me, or wouldn't allow my autism advocate to speak up. She was muted in court. They used that to try to claim that I was mentally ill or schizophrenic or some crap like that. Meanwhile, like, I don't just have my word of mouth for that. I also have you as a witness. I also have the recording of the incidents. It's not like I'm some idiot who's just, I'm seeing magic rainbows and friggin' fairies and dragons and unicorns all over the place, and I'm talking about all sorts of crazy shit. I'm talking about abuse of conduct or abuse of their position. I'm talking about people assaulting me. I'm talking about, things that are actually happening in the real world. When I'm talking about my friends who have been human trafficked, yes, human trafficking actually happens. It literally does happen. I'm not talking about some unicorn walking through the living room here. But that's how I get treated no matter what I say. With you were obviously muted. You were there to be muted. You were aware that you were muted. And when we talked about it afterwards, I've got the recordings with us talking about it. It's not like I don't have evidence that you were muted. But that's not the only thing that they did. Almost everything that I said, they didn't bother to look it up. They just pretended like I was crazy. When I was talking about Natalie Bollinger dying and how these web sleuth groups had gotten involved and done everything that they could to drive me completely nuts, I got treated like I was hallucinating that too. Meanwhile, any idiot can look it up on the internet. The doctor that they had there that I talked to him for less than an hour, and he tried to claim that I was crazy. Meanwhile, the doctor that I talked to every day there, or at least once a week, sorry, his name is Ted Hill. And Ted Hill, he says, well, you're not schizophrenic. You're not delusional. You do know what's going on. You are aware of your surroundings. I don't get where they're trying to push this stuff. I don't even understand why you're in here. And he looked up a lot of stuff. Dr. Hill, he looked up Natalie Bollinger and her situation. He looked up the situation with her stepmoms and with her real mom. And he went to some of these web sleuth groups and looked up some stuff. Like he actually made an effort. Whereas Dr. Klaus Hartman, who was the only one that they were going to listen to, Dr. Klaus Hartman didn't bother to look anything up. Did Dr. Hartman ever try calling you?
I don't really remember. I got a call from one person, and I do not remember who that was. And they just asked me what my role was, and I explained to them that you and I had been working for a year to get your benefits, your housing, and that I had learned quite a bit about the Natalie situation and all the things that transpired after that. And then they never heard from them again. I don't know what I don't know.
Well, out of everything that you guys talked about, that doctor in specific, all he remembered was that I had gotten my housing taken away. And he used that as an excuse for all of the horrible shit that they were doing there. He couldn't remember anything else about your conversation, but that was not Dr. Hartman. Dr. Hartman, you'd have remembered him because he's got a pretty thick German accent.
Oh, no, I didn't talk to anybody like that.
Yeah, he was about useless. But then there's the people that I did talk to, like Ted Hill. There was also a nurse named Joe Hall, and Joe Hall was looking stuff up too. All of the people who actually bothered to talk to me like I'm a person, I got along with well. The ones who looked stuff up got to realize that I was telling the truth. But most of them there, most of the guards that are working there, they're just glad to have somebody to pick on. It's assumed that because you're in prison that you are guilty of a felony and you belong there, and they treat you like that. It didn't matter that I had not been convicted of shit. They were still highly abusive and then made fun of me for telling on them for being abusive, making fun of me because nobody's going to listen because they're the ones with a badge. And that's why we need audio recording devices in those places too.
Yeah.
So I guess we can try to make some phone calls tomorrow. I really would have liked to get them done last week and the week before, but I don't have anybody to make the calls with me. The few calls that I have been able to make haven't gotten me anywhere, and it seems like the phone calls that you've made haven't gotten anywhere either. And that's not any reflection on you. That doesn't mean you're a bad person. That just is what ends up happening when you got to make the phone calls solo. You know.
Yeah. And so this person that will let you drive the car is going to be gone and can't take you to Scottsbluff for how many days, do you think?
It'll probably be Friday at the earliest if he's able to, and he might not feel like driving, so it would be Monday.
Okay. Tomorrow, I think.
Fuck.